The wait is over and the new edition is here. Join us as we pick through the new Battle of Edoras launch box and perhaps more excitingly, what has changed in the rules of this latest edition of the game. Hello and welcome to Striding Edge Games. We're your hosts. I'm Boris.
And I'm Julian.
And we're here with a new edition of Middle-earth strategy battle game. It's incredibly exciting, long awaited, I think. Sort of.
I mean, I think it was a bit of a surprise, but
for us,
it's also great.
Yeah, excellent. Maybe not the best to be spending just before Christmas release, but hey, it's a good, nice Christmas present. We're going to have for us, absolutely. We're going to have a really quick run through, hopefully, of the new box, what we think of it, what's in it. Not do too much of an unboxing because you've probably seen those before, and then more crucially, the new edition. What's changed? What we like, what we don't like, what is average, and most importantly, what that means for the future of Middle-earth and the channel. So, leading off, we have the box set.
Yep. We've got the box up here.
Yeah,
it's a lovely box.
Lovely box.
Nice
tied
box.
into the War of the Rohirrim film, which is coming out this winter. Ultimately, probably a pretty good one for us, because we, as you might have known from other videos, I'm a die-hard Rohan old school fanboy, and you have a soft spot for Dunland in your heart. So kind of a perfect matchup. Perfect box for us, basically, to split.
Yeah, it's a decent box.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Quickly running down what you get in it, you have a whole bunch of warriors and some heroes. So you get 24 of warriors of Rohan, 24 of the hill tribes of Dunland, or I can't remember if they're hill tribes of Dunland or not.
I think they're just Hillmen now.
Hillmen, wild hill tribes, something like that.
They're Hillmen in the Rohirrim setting, and then they are wild men of Dunland in the
that sounds familiar.
Lord of the Rings setting.
And then you get two heroes either side, Haleth and Harmer, and Wolf and General Targ. My memory's working. And then you also happen to get 4 sprues of the Rohan house, which has been out for a little while, but it's still a fantastic kit.
To be clear, that would just build 2 Rohan houses.
Yes, yeah, 4 sprues built 2 houses, but still excellent kit.
Yeah, it's a great box. I mean, within, as well as the sprues, you also get the actual rules manual, which is probably the most exciting thing. A little reference sheet, and you get the Battle of Edoras scenarios and profile booklet.
Yep.
This is useful, I mean, because it means you can play with these armies out of the box. It's got the profiles, it's got the rules, it's got a few scenarios for you to play with, which you can use on the paper battle mat.
Yeah.
But there are also, on release, 2 new army books.
Yes.
So they have reframed a large chunk of the armies from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. This is in the Armies of the Lord of the Rings and the Armies of the Hobbit. We'll have another video where we actually talk a bit about those and how those are different.
Yeah.
So for this, we're just looking what's in this, which is a great set, I think, really.
I think the most exciting part almost is new plastic warriors. The fact that Middle-earth, if you've been following it for a while, if you're new, you might not know, but it's sort of almost the forgotten child of Games Workshop's game systems. There hasn't been a new plastic warrior kit for close to a decade, maybe slightly less.
Yeah, it was whenever the last Hobbit movie came out, I think.
Yeah, so it's been a long time, and the fact that they're Rohan and Dunland is great. They're beautiful sculpts. I'm sure you can find close-ups and pictures and painting guides elsewhere, but they are absolutely fantastic. They're very fiddly, which might be an off-putting to some, but I think it's absolutely worth it. And the heroes are equally just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, it's a definite thing of kind of new modern Games Workshop plastics, which in terms of detail is great. Unfortunately, that means that you have individual faces that you have to stick on, which is going to be a bit tricky when we get to it.
I'll take it over the old Rohan. A few of the warriors were single-piece plastic. You literally just clip them off the sprue and put them in the slotted base.
And they had the sort of like melted details on the side.
I'll take that. Having painted a whole bunch, I will take these any day.
These will be much nicer to paint. But yeah, I mean,
I think that one of the best parts about it is that these are 2 great starter armies. If you are interested in Rohan or Dunland or Wildmen or whatever it is, if you buy this box, that's probably all the warriors you need. You probably don't, unless you're doing some...
Of this, of
these sets, sorry, yeah. If you're planning on collecting a Rohan army, for example, 24 is probably all the foot warriors you need. If you're collecting hill tribes, you might need more, but...
I think, depending... The heroes and the warriors in this box, both sides, I think the Rohan army is almost exactly 400 points.
Right, yep.
Whereas Targ and Wolf with their Wildman is slightly less than 400.
Sure.
That's just because Warriors of Rohan are more expensive.
Wow, they're better, you know.
And I think if you're looking to do the War of the Rohirrim specific armies, for the Dunland or the Traitors, I don't know, whoever they are, but you don't quite get, you can do 400 points, sure.
Yeah.
You probably need some more Hillman if you're going to do higher points.
Yeah, you might need a second box, but certainly with Rohan, that's probably all you need to do medium-sized armies, even the sort of on-foot ones like the Defenders of Helm's Deep and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think just absolutely fantastic box. Overall, recommend it if you're looking at getting into the game, starting again, coming back, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think if you are interested in either this new setting or you're interested in historic Rohan, or potentially just even getting some Wildman for your Isengard, it's a good value box. I think it's £140.
Yes.
And really, so the rulebook is £35 at retail.
Something like that, yeah.
One of these 24 warriors, they will be £31.50.
So you just over
RRP.
30 quid, yeah.
We don't know prices for the heroes, but based on past form, probably going to again be about 30 quid.
Yeah, or if there's individually,
maybe
probably
a bit cheaper.
Yeah,
but so you're looking at £90 for half the sprues and the rulebook,
not including the houses,
not including the Rohan houses.
Yep.
And if you're interested in both, or you have a friend that you want to split with, then it's great. I'd say for that price.
Yeah.
And if you're not interested in this setting, you can buy the rulebook separately. You don't need the box.
Nope. And
straightforward.
Just go get your army book and you're sorted. I think resounding recommendation and endorsement from us on the box. So moving on, the rulebook, that's actually almost for us, we're probably the most excited about. Not a huge amount. There was a bit of trepidation about what the changes would be when the new edition was announced, but basically it's a tightening up. Is that the right term? It's not a refresh. It's a tightening of the screws of the edition. It is a whole new edition, but it's not a ground level base up change.
I'd say there's a lot of clarifications in the rules. There's quite a lot more about kind of things like agreeing with your opponent before the game begins about things like terrain and openings in terrain and lines of sight, how tall your models are, lots of things like that. There are some pretty significant changes, which I think we're just doing maybe like a top level.
Yeah, we're not going to go into it super in depth by paragraph, but we'll run through what jumped out at us as, if you've been playing for a long time, what will definitely shake up your regular matches.
So, in that vein of should we say the single biggest change, and I think we're definitely agreed on this, and I think most of the internet is agreed on this, the thing that they've changed, which has been the same in Middle-earth since 2001...
Yes, probably.
...is...
priority. Pretty huge change. It's quite a small change, really.
It's actually a really simple change.
You roll off, but now whoever wins gets to choose who has priority, which, again, if you are new or coming back to the game and it's a bit foggy, might not seem the hugest change, but in a game that is ostensibly... It's a movement game. It's a skirmish game based around movement, and the game is won and lost in the movement phase, you could argue. The ability to make your opponent go first, or obviously sometimes you want to go first, but the ability to make your opponent go first is huge. Quite frankly, it's I don't want to overuse the word, but pretty huge.
And it's also it's a really interesting change because, like you say, you say it's like you get to move first, but also the player who has the priority gets to decide a lot more within the game. You decide the pairing off of fights, which is hugely significant.
Yes.
You decide the order of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And that means that if you do win priority, but you choose to give it to your opponent, you know, you're getting something, so you get foreknowledge of where your opponent models are going to be. But then when it comes to combats, you're giving them the opportunity to kind of split those up.
I mean, even in the early parts of the game, we were talking about Maelstrom and Battle. Sometimes it's really key that if your opponent goes first, you can react to them with your with where your Maelstrom units come on. You can decide to spend the might to move around and come behind them and envelop parts of their army. So giving away the priority is huge, because sometimes you would roll off and then go, oh, I won it. Well, damn, like I kind of want to go second and react to your movement. Cavalry armies, again, Rohan fanboy, but cavalry armies, I think it's going to be pretty monumental, because sometimes you absolutely want to go first.
Yeah, and sometimes you want to go second.
Sometimes you really want them to move forward, and you move second to do the charge, safe in the knowledge that you're not going to get countercharged.
Yeah, I mean, that's especially, I mean, I think with cavalry, we've both recently played cavalry only armies. Going second is huge, because, you know, you've got your lovely cavalry wall and you're like, yes, it's great, we'll charge in, we'll smash everyone about, and then you're like, wait, they're going to countercharge me.
Yeah, unless you can tag up every single one of their models, which you're generally a lower model.
You're not going to do,
You're not going to do. So it's just monumental. There's not too much more to say about it, but other than...
it's going to really shake everything up, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really going to change kind of how certain things play.
Yeah.
And just make it... Overall, I'd say that is a great change.
Huge tick.
I think it's really... Not necessarily necessary, but an interesting, like, really detailed change that changes how the game will play quite significantly.
But doesn't intrinsically, like, it's not a sort of a game-ruining change, or it's not such a huge change that it no longer resembles the edition before.
Yeah,
some other game systems has definitely happened, and it's a bit of a shame. Sometimes, I'm sure they get better, but it's still the game we know and love, which is great. But it's now fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an exciting. It's a kind of, I would say it's indicative in general of what is in this rule book.
Yeah,
is that what has changed broadly, and I'm sure there are people who will disagree, but like most of the things that have changed are either quality of life or small but actually, quite significant changes, which generally have introduced more interesting choices into the game.
100%. I would say broadly, big tick all round. We haven't been over every paragraph and every line and every bullet point and comma, but the big ticket items, definitely.
Yeah.
Leading us on to our next one, we would say our joint choice of next largest change.
Yeah, and I mean, I know there's actually been a lot of hype about this before. Again, this was probably quite a necessary change.
Yeah. And probably the one you could see coming. But the priority, I don't think I would have guessed. If you told me 6 months ago, guess what is going to change in the new edition, I don't think I would have guessed priority. This one, I think, probably would have. Yeah,
and I'd say this one is it's actually less in this rulebook and more in the army books.
Yeah.
And it's something that's actually quite subtle, pernicious almost, but is the general rebalance of the way that fight values work. And this has consequences for all sorts of things. I mean, it changes how your heroes work, it changes how heroic actions work, it also changes certain older behaviors of kind of having like higher fight value warriors and relying on that and things like that.
I think, as they put in one of the articles they released, it's giving breathing room back to the fight value ranges. They said themselves that basically a lot of the game happened between fight value 3 and 5.
Yeah.
Almost all of the game, in fact. Anything below or above that was quite rare. So they've just sort of put a crowbar in and widened everything out. So things that were, I don't think much has gone down. I think most has had a bump up.
I don't think anything, I'm not sure anything has gone down.
There'll be someone who points out.
I'm sure there probably will be, but like most things have not gone down, and actually only certain things have gone up.
Yes, yeah, it's not like a +1 across the board, because that would effectively have the same.
It'd sort of be the same.
It'd be the same.
But like, I mean, I think the key example for me is essentially in the old rules, Aragon was fight 6.
Yep.
Now he's fight 7.
Yep.
Which means that he's in the he remains in the upper top tier. I mean, as it was before, there was only so many heroes that had fight 6. It was probably about 8 or 9.
6 was very good
in the entire game.
Yeah.
And it remains broadly the same at fight 7.
He's saying 7 is the new 6. 6.
Yeah, but it's different because our sort of the next sort of thing that has changed quite a lot is heroics, and this reflects in the fight value as well. The big change in heroics is that heroic strike is plus D3
rather than D6. Yep.
Again, massive change. I mean, this meant in the past that if you had a sort of named orc hero that had heroic strike, Grishnak had strike.
Ours. He's fight 4, but has heroic strike,
and he could get to fight 10.
He could be a higher fight than the Watcher in the Water, or the Balrogs fight 10,
or Aragorn on a barrel.
Yeah.
I mean.
Or I think it's either the Balrog or Sauron a fight 9.
Sauron's 9, I think, and Balrog's 10.
Grishnak, little what about their legs orc, on a 6 could be a higher fight than Sauron, which doesn't feel. I know it's on a 6, 1 in 6 chance, doesn't feel great. Whereas now it's D3. So someone with fight 4 with D3, with strike rather, is
maximum. He's looking at 7.
Yeah, is only going to threaten up to 7.
Yeah. And it means, in the past, again, it's an interesting thing because now you have Aragorn and you're like, oh, I'm fighting someone who's fight 4. He could strike.
Yep.
I'm fight 7. Should I strike?
Yep.
Whereas in the old rules, you'd be like, yes, I will.
I will, because
you just need to win.
It's 50-50 almost that he would, the striking model would get to 7 and maybe above. And obviously the old one was 6. So
whereas now, you've got that 2/3 chance, which is much more reliable than a sort of...
Yeah.
Well, in the old rules, from fight 4 to fight 6 would have been 1 in 3 chance.
Yep.
Now it's 2/3 that they're not going to equal you.
Yes. Yep.
And so you're much more likely to take that risk, which just makes it more interesting.
Yes. I think it just also stops the wild randomness. So sometimes you'd have a strike off.
Yeah.
And you'd roll a 1 on the strike and be like, oh, I've lost due to just a single thing. Whereas if you're now on a strike off, D3 is less random, hopefully.
Yeah.
Whereas, but also because it's only D3, I would guess, caveat, but we haven't played much, but I would guess strike will become less of an all-consuming powerhouse and more of a tactical choice about whether you'll call it or not.
You'd almost always use it
beforehand.
Beforehand.
Yes, yeah. It was if you had it and you were up against anyone who was even vaguely against you, near your fight level, you would be, I'll just call it, or maybe even preemptive calling.
The only way it's probably not change would be is if you have a hero that has strike and it's the same fight value as the other hero who doesn't have strike.
Then it's obvious.
Then you will call strike.
Then obviously even on a 1, you're beating their fight value. But so the fight value reshuffle and the heroic strike
change is massive.
Another big tick from us though, I think.
Yeah, I think broadly the having looked through kind of the profiles relatively quickly.
Yeah.
I think, as you say, very few things have gone down.
I can't think
that we can think of.
Yep.
And it's not like a flat +1 across the board.
Yeah. A few things have lost their flat +1 bonus, like army bonuses and things. So I would say it's potentially harder to gain a flat fight bonus. Some things have gained a fight bonus against certain enemies. Some things have gained a fight bonus only if you're tied. And strike is less, is only D3 rather than D6. So I would say, as a broad rule of thumb, if you'd agree, fight value is more significant now because there are less ways to counteract it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is more significant. It's an interesting change for something like elves who remain at fight 5 for their warriors, which is still wild. And still just makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
And then, with the specific elven heroes, it's interesting. Gil-galad has lost access to heroic strike.
Yes.
Which I think lots of people are a bit upset about, but he is fight 9.
He remains fight 9.
He remains fight 9, which means that, Aragorn has to call a heroic strike and roll a 2 on a D3 to equal him.
Sorry, yes.
And a 5 or a 6 to beat him.
Yes.
Which I'm like, yeah, I think that's fair. And otherwise, he would be, again, back in the situation where he's like, oh, I'm fighting Sauron, strike. great, we're equal.
One, yeah. One as soon as
Whereas we know how that goes.
Yeah, well, that's very true. Spoilers.
Spoilers. If anyone's not, well, he's not really in the movie. Well, he sort of is, but it's not.
Very briefly, yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just a really interesting change. And if we sort of move on to, like a huge kind of positive change.
Another big tick from us. I'd say there's several other heroics that have changed. To go through them briefly, so heroic channeling is now simply, rather than accessing a channeled version of a spell, you just cast that spell on a 6. There's no two versions of spells, there is just the spell. And heroic channeling just means you don't roll any casting dice, and you cast, having counted cast on a 6, which is great. You still spend the point of will, but you spend a single point of will, single point of might, and you roll 6 on the spell, which is sort of something of a theme. Again, maybe touch on the army books, but magic, I would say, is potentially less random. Well, definitely less random. Potentially less powerful overall, but much more consistent. So casters are
more
much
reliable.
Much more reliable. So casters have the ability to cast on that 6 with channeling, and there's no empowered channeled version of spells. So that's pretty big. We'll have to wait and see for things like, the big classic casters that you saw a lot, like the Witch King, whether he'll be as popular nowadays or even more popular maybe. So yeah, the heroic channeling, pretty interesting. Heroic resolve is another one that you almost never saw. I think
very rarely.
I mean, how many?
It might come up, but like
I can't remember how many heroes had it, and I don't know how many still have it.
I think I've only ever used it like once.
Yeah, and before it was just you gained a bubble of resistance to magic, which obviously if you were playing a game against army with no magic, absolutely pointless.
Well, for starters, not many characters actually had it.
No, I can't remember how many do have it still, but more interestingly, it still does that, so you still gain the resistance to magic bubble, but it is an effective auto pass, I believe 6-inch stand fast bubble. Yeah. And most importantly, it still triggers even if the hero is in combat. So that's really interesting. Again, it's sort of it could be a big rebalance. Obviously, one of the things beforehand is if you had a hero with very high courage in a low courage army, they're broken, you could charge them, stop the stand fast because they're in combat, and then watch the warriors melt away. Now, if the hero has heroic resolve, no stopping it. They just get that big bubble of heroic of stand fast, which is fantastic. And then lastly, heroic challenge.
Sounds like channeling, but challenge.
Which is really interesting. Again, not really used before. I think we used it once. I've used it once, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think outside of some slightly Lurtz could always do it in the Lurtz's
Legion.
What's it called?
Lurtz's
Scouts. In the Lurtz Legendary Legion, he could always heroic challenge, regardless of who he was challenging, which you could use to like bully hobbits for some reason. But I mean, challenge kind of was not laughable, but like it didn't really have a straightforward place. I think
when you got 3 might points, there's always something better to spend your might on.
I mean, why would you do a heroic challenge? Yeah. Whereas now you've got the heroic challenge, which gives you bonus attacks.
Bonus attack, bonus to wound. You don't have to call it in base contact. You can call it when you're 6 inches away.
You can call it at distance. And more crucially, if your opponent accepts, because in the old rules, I mean, certain heroes, there's no reason why I would accept this challenge.
You just run away.
I'm just going to run away. Yeah. Like, Fairden's probably a great example of, like, often you'd be like, no, I don't really want to.
He's got a 12-inch stand fast, so maybe.
Yeah, so, but I mean, in certain situations, you just be like, there's no value.
Depends who's challenging him.
In me accepting this. But now, both the challenger and the challengee get bonus attacks, bonus to wound.
+1 attack, +1 to wound, and I believe they just have to basically magnet into each other and fight. Yeah. Same as before. But that gives you a bit of an incentive. You're not... If Azog comes at you, who's already scarier than your hero, at least you get a bit of a bonus to accepting it.
Like at least it's not like this is only downsides.
There's only downsides, and if I refuse, it's downside, and I'm just sort of a bit wasted. Yeah. I believe it's also now you get a might point back if you win, and it can't take you above your starting point,
which is a shame.
One of the few things that could in the old edition. You could go above your starting might points. Bit of a shame, but hey ho, can't have everything. So yeah, again, heroics, broadly, big tick from us.
Yeah, I think all of the changes on heroics are pretty pretty reasonable, nothing too complicated. I think, like we already said about Heroic Strike, I think that's a really good change.
Fantastic, yeah.
Because in the past, just like Heroic Strike was not boring, but it was just very, very like, oh yeah, cool, yeah, I'll Heroic Strike. You're Heroic Striking, cool. Let's get to combat and roll off.
Yeah, almost like it's a sort of theme that we were talking about earlier. A lot of what was an auto include or an auto choice option beforehand seems to be, I don't know if this is intentional or just an artifact of what the rebalance has done, but seems to have been, it's now a more considered choice. It's not an automatic thing to do. So if you're, so like with the Heroic Strike, if your opponent is 2 fight below you, maybe you don't call the Heroic Strike.
Yeah.
In counter, maybe you risk it and save the might point to try and win the duel. A lot of it, I think is, they've taken away the, you strike, okay, I'll strike.
I think that's maybe kind of the theme throughout. Because also once we get onto the army lists, like a lot of what's happened in rebalancing army lists is they've got rid of things which are like the obvious must-haves or the must-takes.
Yes. Boromir's Banner.
Boromir's Banner
was fantastic.
It's amazing. Why wouldn't you take
spoiler,
it?
Still very good.
It's still pretty good, but
it's different, and you might not want to spend 50 points.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Whereas like in the old rules, broadly, you almost always wanted priority. Even if you didn't really want priority, you probably still wanted it.
Yeah. Just for the fight value, pairing off. Even if it was you hadn't fought yet, and you had some shooting, you got to shoot first.
Yeah, and if you're a cavalry army, like we say, generally you actually almost want to go second. But if it comes down to priority, you often want to win it anyway.
Yep.
Things like that. And then the same with the heroics. Strike. It was like, obviously you'll strike. Obviously you'll strike.
Yep.
And with a lot of the magic, when you had the channeled versions and the non-channeled versions, there was a lot of the channeled versions which never saw play because, might's too precious.
Might's too precious, and they weren't too much better than the non-channeled versions.
Yeah, like the advantages were minimal.
Especially for characters that had up 3 might per turn, you might just go, I'll just cast the non-channeled version a few times, and especially so there are quite a few spells that had the channeled version, so they'd inflict a wound, or they would restore a might point, or they would restore
D3,
and the channeled version would restore D3, and you're like, well, that's a 1 in 3 chance that I just wasted a point of might because I roll a 1, which is what the non-channeled version was.
And then there were a couple that people love to take and always do, like on goblins doing the channeled fury to get 6 up feel no pain.
We're guilty.
But it's more. It's kind of, so what they've done is, I think generally they've made a lot of choices slightly more difficult.
Yeah, which I think I've seen a few people decry their favourite. I don't want to be mean, but their favourite toy. They had a particular way of playing. It's almost in terms of it was a solved game, as it were. I don't want to use that because it's an amazing, expansive, ever-evolving game. But I think a lot of people had got comfortable in playing their army that was optimal in a particular way. They took it, they knew what they were doing, and it relied on 1 or 2 tricks and synergies that were just automatically so good that there was no point you wouldn't include them.
Yeah.
This has stripped away a lot or rebalanced and reshuffled a lot of them, which if you did enjoy playing that army, I can understand why you would potentially feel a bit sore about it or something. As a Rohan player, I've definitely had a few toys taken away, but I think it's exactly what the game needs.
Not that many.
No, not really. Rohan are doing very well for themselves.
But I mean, I think in terms of toys, it was probably the last thing that we haven't covered yet, and it's kind of the opposite almost of the auto takes. Is in the old system, in general, monsters were kind of perceived to be a bit weak.
They were okay, yeah.
And what they've done in the new edition is changed a few things that kind of I think are going to have a big effect.
I think so.
So in particular, I mean, the changes to fight values, which we've already talked about, are largely beneficial for monsters because most of the monsters that are still in the game are fight 6 or above.
Yes.
Which means that, in the past, your Grishnak was able to be like, oh, hi, Cave Troll. Yeah. I'm going to strike. Hey, look, I can beat you.
Yeah.
Whereas now, it's pretty unlikely.
Yep.
Also, big changes in kind of the way that some of the brutal power attacks work. Hurl is a bit different. It's less complicated, which is great.
They were kind of almost you needed a flow chart of how to organise them and then argue about the exact one.
Yeah, the exact bearing that is the centre to the centre.
1 degree off either side would knock down all my troops or knock down all of your troops. And that's all changed.
Barge is a bit more consistent now. Instead of a D6 move, it's D3 plus 3.
Yep. Which is great.
Which is great because you're at least going to move 4, which is pretty good.
Yep.
The big thing I think actually for monsters that could be really interesting is the capability now that when they fight, they can strike spear supports.
Yeah, so they can strike supporting. So if you have, before you could, charge a troll with 1 warrior and then 1 spear support, and the troll has 3 attacks, and they waste them as it were. You're only ever going to
tear apart 1 warrior.
They're going to kill 1 warrior, and then they're going to stuck there for the turn. And then if you win priority next turn, charge another warrior. Whereas now you can strike both of those models. You get a free attack, as it were, so you don't have to split your attacks. If you've got 3 attacks, you get to strike the front model, and then you get a free strike against the support, which is one thematic, because you do see in the movies the trolls just barreling through ranks of Gondorians.
Yeah, I was thinking of Sauron in the last Alliance battle, where it's just like, woohoo, you go away, you go away.
Which is great, but also technically great because, again, it gives that slight impetus to maybe, do we lock them down with even more models? Do we try and charge them with one of our big heroes? It gives you those more options, which I think is just great. The technical, I think, give it a read yourself because the sort of, not flow chart, but the steps for conducting brutal power attacks are still quite in depth now. But overall, really good.
I think we're going to see some more monsters on tables.
I really hope so. I really hope we see more monsters, we see more magic, we see a lot more variance in what heroes we see being brought to lead armies.
Yeah, I think it's less straightforward. I mean, obviously, like the top heroes are still the top heroes.
They're still great.
But I think it's kind of that you might see more. I'm hopeful of seeing more like generic captains, which have a place. But in the past, often you'd be like, well, I could take the Gondorian captain, but I've got like 5 named Gondor captains that I can take instead.
You desperately need the heroic march. Then whereas Rohan have march on Theoden, so you just I'm not sure I've even painted a Rohan captain yet, which says something maybe. Who knows?
But I think we're rambling now.
Well, yes. Overall, big ticks across the board, I'd say.
I think for the new rules, the new box set, it does what a box set, a new edition box set would do. It's a good way for someone who's on the fence to get into the game. It gives you 2 decent armies. You have a few toys, you've got some heroes on horses. Infantry is infantry, but it's great to have, and it's the basis of something bigger.
If you're not interested in the armies, don't worry about it. I wouldn't say you must buy the box. It's the best thing since sliced bread. If you just want the rulebook, go for that. But if you're at all interested in any part of it, I'd jump on it and grab a copy, especially even if you sell the houses to someone and make a bit of money back. Overall, absolutely great. So, really good box.
Good box.
Really good edition.
Good new rules.
Good new rules. And thirdly, interestingly, probably the biggest changes is the army lists and list building, which we will cover in a separate video. Be out at the same time as this one, so you can go across to that one if you want.
Probably have the link in the description or whatever.
Some sort of that thing like that. Thank you for listening to us ramble. We will have all our links across the bottom of the screen, which you should have now. I've done my editing job right. And please keep an eye out. We've been really loving the feedback. You guys have been dropping comments on our videos. It's been really lovely to see that you guys are enjoying the stuff that we're working really long and really hard on.
Yep.
So thank you very much to you guys, and we will see you in the next video.